We'll be indoors real well. Entertainer. Yep. His brother, James, you know, he was. Well, I like rock.
In pulling our contractors.
So it's good. A few of those that he said there were like five. We find out.
Yeah, I wonder if she could.
I feel like
We're still working. I figured it was kind of worse.
We worked on it. It didn't work.
So yeah, I just see what it's time stamp it and then time stamp it. And then it's like the timing of the exchange servers.
I don't know that it looks. I mean, if they don't, they're very direct. There actually is. People don't read all that stuff. So like class, there's a lot of that ties together and that stuff. No, but wait, which I guess. And he's one of the lake, I think the lake goes on. Well, I don't. It's a population. And I think that the moment to on that. We have. Great, I think you can make it for it.
All right, we'll go ahead and it's 2 o'clock. We'll call the meeting to order. I will start with introductions. I'm Jeremy Tanth of the Seymour Regional Planning Commission and current chair of the board.
Alex McElroy, SEMPO staff.
Wayne Haas, Mayor Jackson. Mark Corkin, MoDOT's district engineer. Jim Rhodes, City of Jackson. Jeff Gilliam, MoDOT. Tom Caldwell, MoDOT. Earl Armstrong. Okay. Jeff Long, Southeast Missouri.
Marla Mills, KLG engineering and civil staff. Mandy Brink, Zemo Court and Zemo Ready. Stacy Kinder, Mayor Kate.
Katrina Angus, Cape Girardeau Regional Airport.
Troy Herbst, Cape Girardeau County. Tom Mobley, Cape County Transit.
Drew, perfect timing.
Christian, Single Regional Planning.
There you go.
Introduce yourselves.
Oh, we gotta introduce ourselves, that's about right.
Like I.
And online we have Betsy Tracy, Chris Crocker, Michael Brandon, and Scott Perry.
Everyone. First, we have a motion to the adoption of the agenda.
Motion for approval.
Motion.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion stands. Next is the approval of minutes of the December 21st, 2022 meeting. Everyone's had a chance to read through those. Accept a motion to accept or any amendments, maybe necessary.
I move we adopt the minutes. Adopt the minutes.
Have a motion. Second. Motion and second, all in favor? Any opposed? Passes. I have no communications to share at this time, so we'll move on to any public comments regarding items not on the agenda. Is there anything I'd like to bring up? Hearing none, we'll move into our new and unfinished business. We're going to start with a proposal for the extension of the I-29 from St. Joseph to I-55 in Cape Girardeau presentation. Mr. Armstrong is here to help us with that presentation.
Yeah, so Mr. Armstrong had reached out to me and shared a proposal for extension of I-29. It's a proposal that he has shared with some MoDOT staff as well as some local representatives. And he expressed an interest in sharing the proposal with the SEMPO board as well. So I invited him to present at our meeting today, and I'm going to help with his PDF presentation. Lower the lights just a little bit. Carl, if you just tell me next slide, I'll advance it for you. Sure. That look all right?
It should be good. Well, I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to make a presentation. And actually make a little out of my field on the chemical engineer rather than the civil engineer. I built a few plant buildings over the years. So next. Why am I interested in these projects? Maybe the cave, I thought it had a very completed 2 years of pre-engineering at Southeast State University with the School of Mines, Missouri S&T. And I worked all over the place in St. Louis, Eastern North Carolina, Chattanooga, Texas, retired by Chicago. And the plants that we had made everything in plastics, detergents. At one time, we made about half the free world's supply of acid. And you go to the doctor's office, the nitrile gloves that you see probably came from the plant where I last worked in Texas. And I've participated in the startup of 2 large grassroots plants. So I have a pretty good idea of what manufacturing companies are looking for. They come to scout an area. Okay, I've been away for 44 years, retired, and kind of frustrated with the lack of progress. Engineers like to define the progress. And actually, I think what we have here is 3 interrelated problems. And this one, the new Mississippi Bridge, really doesn't have suitable roads on the other side. The next one is the airline access. I used to try to fly in, and sometimes I could make it to the because sometimes used to come in from Midway, Chicago, to Marion. I don't think Marion has an airport. And the other thing I noticed is that the city area growth it's pretty minimal over a long period of time. Not too much different than I left. Let's take these problems to one at a time. The first problem is from the Cape Bridge over the I-24. And I used to drive up when I worked in Chattanooga. And I-24 was a breeze, but I hated driving these roads at night or if it came. And really, if you had a road, you could probably shoot through about 35 to 40 minutes. But you see that wonders all over the place. Kind of wondered about the past. It seems logical that you would have this spur, but understand that IDOT canceled the study of it 215, saying the funds could better be used somewhere else. And my feeling is that Chicago is sucked up all the funds. Southern Illinois was cut short. It was opposed by the environmentalists because it goes through Shawnee Forest. And there was opposition from the business movement. You can kind of understand this. You're in Carbondale and Marion. Why you work this traffic over the Cape when this could be coming up to our region. So, a background. How much next one. Okay, the second problem. And scouts come to the area looking for a place to the manufacturing plant. You start behind the 8 ball, so to speak, because you only have the airline access. Okay, you go down to Nashville. From Paducah, you can go to Charlotte. Marion, Carbondale, in that area, unless they went to the Cape and Paducah, they go up to Evansville or St. Louis, 2-hour drive. And you kind of hate these drives when you go to pick up someone. And traffic and all that kind of thing. So the airline access here is not good. In fact, there's a void area. It doesn't have much airline access at all. And you start at Memphis over Springfield up to St. Louis, over to Evansville, and down to Nashville. And those where the major airlines are. And I realize that these airports are expanding and so on, and we should be encouraged to do that. But anyway, there's a huge region here. So what can we do to improve airline access? Next. The third problem is the slow growth in America. And looking at Cape, Cape didn't grow very much from the 1960 range to 1980. It started out in 2000. The major growth reason was the P&G plan. And some of it is biotile, single port, and so on. And Jackson didn't do too bad, but they're closer to the DOG plant, so I expect they got a lot of workers for their contractors. Let's look at Southern Illinois. Carbondale, from 1980 to 2020 was lost. Marion has gained a little bit. Murfreesboro was lost. Anna lost. Chester hasn't grown any. And Harrisburg has lost. And this area, to put it bluntly, is age. Cape is showing some signs of growth, but Southern Illinois is aging. Look at Kentucky, Paducah. 1960, 35,000. And it hasn't done anything particularly, it's down to 30,000. Mayfield has been static. Well, if you add up the total of all these cities, we got about 184,000 population. Okay, next. Okay, we have a training why we invent the wheel. So we can look at other areas, see what they're doing. And maybe we can learn something from them. And we'll go all the way back to 1880. And you see Cape had a population of about 4,000. Paducah about 8, Carroll around 9, Evansville, Indiana 29, Springfield about 7. You'll have a growth from the Sooners because all these people were gathered there. This is in the 1890s. They wanted to get sooner than later to the land. Oh, okay, so we got a grand total. Okay, and Southern Illinois of 184,000 Paducah also. But Springfield has a population of 170,000. Well, look at the airline access of Springfield. You can fly just about anywhere in the country you want to fly. So how did they pull this off? Well, let's look at it. You say, yeah, Springfield has branches tourist. People fly in there all the time. It has Table Rock, Little Shoulders. It has Missouri State University, 23,500 students. So that's what we can say about Springfield. But if we want to compare Springfield with a population of about 170,000, 284 some of the cities in the tri-state area. Engineers say, well, you're comparing apples to oranges. Well, maybe we are, but wouldn't it be great if instead of 11 non-stop flights from the area, you had 6? How are we going to make these areas grow? Well, let's look at the combined resources of the tri-state region compared to Springfield. You got 3 universities, Southeast, Southern Illinois, Northern State. And you combine all those up, population, student population, almost 40,000. Of course, Paducah, it's a branch of Northern State. Well, what about the recreation and tourist attractions? Here you've got Southeast Missouri. It's a gateway to those efforts. You have the riverfront, Old Town. shipyard music festival, simple water attractions, trail of tears, or I could go on with a lot of others. That's why I think it's simple. Look at Southern Illinois, you have giant cities, state park, Little Grand Canyon. And, you know, I was driving down 3 last week, and there's some beautiful bluffs over there with the trail of tears, Little Grand Canyon. Yes. You have the cave in the rock, Crab Archer Lake, Shawnee National Forest, Fort Defiance, South Carolina. And you've got the home of Superman, which probably hasn't been promoted that much. Western Kentucky, it's a riverfront. City has an arts house, gateway to Wicklow towns, and the biggest Kentucky town, the land between the lakes. Absolutely beautiful country. So the tri-state area has some of the best hunting and fishing you'll find in. And all kinds of recreation. And individually, these areas are very underutilized. The advertising really isn't there. And, you know, Springfield has book shows taking a look. These areas have 3 aces, the Mississippi River, the Ohio River, and the Tennessee River. People love rivers. They love steamboats, sharp paddle wheels, and all that kind of thing. So, what I'm saying is that this will require a combined Kentucky, Missouri, Illinois tourist promotion campaign. Now, I grew up on a farm, and we had cows, we had pigs, we had chickens, and so on. And there's an old saying, when it comes to money, about a cash cow. A cash cow is a cow that gives a lot of milk and you can sell a lot of milk. So bring cash in. Then you can talk about a piggy bank. All 3 of these states have a piggy bank for tourist promotion. But I'm going to talk about a cash cow. And with a sale might have 8, 10, maybe a dozen little pigs. And there's only so many nipples to go around. So the little runt pig gets the last nipple, if it gets a nipple at all. And individually, these 3 areas aren't going to make much of a amount of noise when it comes to the tourist budget in Jefferson City, with Springfield, Illinois, and Frankfort, Kentucky. But you get 3 runt pigs together squealing, and they're going to hear it all the way to Jefferson City. And you're going to hear it all the way to Springfield. You'll hear it all the way to Frankfort, Kentucky. And what is really needed, and this is one of the things I hope will be an action item for some of the people here, is a combined tourist area of promotion. You've got the 3 rivers. You look at the rivers, it's kind of the heart of this country. You need a branding, maybe you call it the heart of the rivers. Get an advertising agency. They could look at it. But this is February 15th. There's plenty of time to get with the 3 states and get something done. Because I'd like to see the tourist area utilized. And you get tourists coming in, then they're going to have demand for a lot of different things. Maybe for airport, things like that. Next. Well, one of the things that we need is improved airfield. Airline access. It needs to be centrally located, so from K, Paducah, or from Carbondale and so on, you could get there in about a half an hour. To do that, we're going to need a 924 still. And okay, this corresponded. And this has been the big bugaboo. But anyway, I'm going to throw out a plan here. Suppose that Illinois purchases the right of way for an I-24 store from Cape to New Columbia's over here on I-24. Let's suppose that Missouri and Kentucky split the construction funds for the I-24. About 25 miles each. And Illinois works with the federal agencies and so on to get an airport. So I'm going to throw out some numbers. This is what I would call a swag. Do you all know what a swag is? Swag is a world scientific gas. But let's suppose that to construct this I-24, that you need about $300 billion. And let's suppose that Illinois pays for the right of way, they get a third of it. So you get down to 200 billion. And let's suppose that the federal government helps with this, because this is interstate. And maybe they pick up 25 or 30% of it. So you're down to maybe 65, 75 million dollars for Kentucky and Missouri contributing to this. And, you know, why would they do this? They probably wouldn't do it unless there was some benefit to them. So let's look at how different regions might react to this. Let's look at Illinois. You have an airport that have the improved airline service. You get the tourist advertising tri-state thing going, you're going to have a lot more tourist dollars. I think Illinois' avenue growth really is tourist. And you have improved traffic inflow to the area.
Yeah, I was going to jump in on that. I think that's a good approach for one, but I think we do need to look at some of these smaller townships.
For folks that are on the line, make sure that you're on mute.
Okay. Well, against it. I gotta get to head away from there. In Illinois, one of the states is showing financing, even more so. And the other thing is this environment, keep bringing up Shawnee Forest. But really, it was only about 10 miles to Shawnee Forest. And when you look at the overall equation, you're going to have less damage to the atmosphere of going straight through than all these winding roads that go all over the place. So the other thing is I-24 and I-57 go through Shawnee Forest. My question is, how did they get these approved? There must have been a want to in order to get them approved. Okay, let's go on to the next slide. Kentucky. Well, it will increase the I-24 utilization And it also had great tour there. I began when I was in my eighties. The out of date Carroll Village over into Turkey, almost outdated. Against, there would be a mixed reaction to another airport. Berkeley Field is the good airport. But if you could get more dollars into the area, more tourists into the area, these airports could grow too. And finally, in Missouri, the Mississippi Bridge will be totally utilized. It's been sitting there for how long? What, 2003, 2004, or something like that. Really not utilized like it ought to. And it'd be easier for executives and managers to access SEMPO. Somebody told me that it was at an airline flying to Cincinnati. I thought, gee, why would anybody in this area want to fly to Cincinnati? And we have a PNG unit in our plant. Realize that the people there that the executives, the engineers, and so on, they need good airline access. I don't know, maybe you're flying to Nashville and up to Cincinnati. Against the mixed reaction to another airport. Cape has a good airport, but it alone can provide the tourism, economic development of an increased airline service to a tri-state area. And it's like, well, gee, if we go ahead and expand the Cape Airport, we get this tri-state airport, it's going to cut down business at Cape. Not necessarily. Springfield has 11 nonstop flights all over the country. And little city of Joplin sitting over there has 2 nonstop flights, one to Denver and one to Chicago. So I'm pretty well getting where you want to for that. That's, well, what's the strategy for doing this? In the Cape area, we're going to have wide. Otherwise, this meeting will be taking place 10 years later, and we'll be talking about the same things. So you got to get the local organizations, university, get the state representatives on board. And they can talk to their counterparts in Illinois and Kentucky. And you got the universities in other states, you know, and SIU to work first together on the tourism aspect of it. And then the next thing to work on is the roads and the airport. You have to get some political support. Southern Illinois, too many funds are being diverted to Chicago. Southern Illinois is a little orphan, but all of the, not all of it, most of the 100 goes northward. Now, this is the main part of my presentation. And this is labeled as I-24. I'm sorry, I-29, coming from St. Joseph, out of the Cape. And a lot of this is in the appendix, but I want to go through this quickly, so I don't want to take up the notes. Okay, right now, I-70 is seriously overcrowded. St. Louis, Columbia, so on. We're looking at maybe spending $870 to add more lanes. On 10 or 15 years, if you don't go from 6 lanes to 8 lanes, you still have the same problem. So there should be a study of how you divert the through traffic around St. Louis, around Columbia, around Kansas City. And I don't want to go into this, but I have handouts that I'm going to leave with you. Actually, there is a project called the Avenue of the Saints. And the reason it's called that, it goes from St. Paul to St. Louis. And why not tag something onto that? In the St. Louis area, go to the next one. And it goes down to the Daniel Boone Bridge, goes to Winston, so on. So, like I say, it's a listed project. Let's tag something onto it next. How many of you have been on I-70, maybe for a medical appointment or something, and got stuck in traffic? Let's see, huge miles. Well, it's happened to me. How many of you got stuck at the intersection of I-55 and 67? Same problem, you can set to, typically if there's a right or something. So why not go from Mansfield down to 55 and 67, bypass all those traffic around the St. Louis area? These metropolitan areas, they don't need more traffic. It just adds to the congestion. So they're begging for something to deal with the congestion. So this would be a good project to look at. Okay, next one. I'm not going to get into this because it deals with the local. Keep going. And somehow or another, this got into the local paper, but this is the proposed bypass from I-29 at St. Joseph. So that's my presentation, and I really appreciate it to listen to it. We got things are done. We've got handouts. Alex can do. So I'm finished. Do you have questions? Whatever.
Any questions from Mr. Armstrong?
Okay.
Well, thank you for coming and joining us, sharing your proposal.
Thank you very much.
And we have copies of this presentation. If you don't have one, you can take it with you.
Thank you, Mr. Armstrong. Here in a second to reset. We'll move on to the next item, the fiscal year 2024 Unified Planning Work Program. Discussion of the work.
Okay, so this year is going to be a little bit unique from previous years. For a number of factors, and I want to briefly touch on what some of those factors are before we get into the list that our planning committee has contemplated earlier this month. First off, we were awarded our State Streets and Roads for All grant application. So we'll be receiving $160,000 for the development of a comprehensive safety action plan for a total budget of $200,000. So those federal funds don't count against our planning funds that we receive each year. And the timing in which the grant is going to be awarded and we get the notice to proceed, I project it's most likely going to be right around the beginning of our fiscal year. So we'll have this project on top of whatever the board selects as work elements for this fiscal year. Another component is our planning funds have increased since the finalizing of the 2020 census numbers and the passing of the bipartisan infrastructure law. The amount of planning funds we receive increased by about 25,000 a year. Another component to this fiscal year is MoDOT changed their carryover policy for unspent planning funds from a 5-year carryover policy to 4 years. And we had always been in compliance with that. We do run a bit of a balance because we're a smaller MPO, and some fiscal years when we have to tackle larger required federal long-range planning initiatives like our MTP. We need to be able to have somewhat of a bank to be able to invest resources and to get that done in that fiscal year. So it wouldn't hurt us this fiscal year to spend down a little bit more than we typically do on an annual fiscal year, just to remain in compliance and a cushion within that cap that they put on the 4-year carryover threshold. And then finally, we'll actually be receiving a little bit more in planning funds from the state of Illinois. It'll be either between 25,000 and 65,000 we could potentially be receiving from Illinois. And that'll be another agenda item that I'll touch on just a little bit, but those are some of the factors going into this fiscal year. So all that to say, with our selection process, we're trying to do somewhat of a balance between spending a little bit more than we typically do, and also carrying a workload of this other large planning initiative that we're tagging on to this fiscal year. So with all that in mind, I'll draw your attention to this one pager. It's front and back. It says FY 2024 Unified Planning Work Program. This is a draft list that I had shared with our planning committee. At the top, you'll see what projects the planning committee selected and recommended bringing to the board. So I can go through the entire list of projects, or I could just first speak on what the planning committee has recommended, and then we can open it up from there. I'll start with what the planning committee recommended then. It's a little bit shorter for me. All right, so first is we will be scheduling our comprehensive safety action plan as a work element for the year. It is a larger planning initiative, and typically we'll select 1 or 2 larger planning initiatives, just depending on what we need to accomplish that year. The next project they selected was we have pitched trail connections between Cape and Jackson and other areas of destination within our planning area. And they like the idea of getting a little bit more granular into what the trail alignments would look like and what the options are. We had identified in our 2018 Regional Bike and Pedestrian Plan, north trail connection between Cape and Jackson, and also a south trail connection between Cape and Jackson. But as far as then turning that over and saying we're ready for a construction grant, there's more planning resources that could be invested into that before we're at that stage. And that's what the planning committee really drew to with that idea of a plan, is getting a little bit more planning behind those type of trail connections. That way, when grant opportunities arise, we have a little bit more clear of an idea of what our preferred connection routes would be.
Alex, can I ask you something about that? Has there been, when it said study, has there been a groundswell of some interest, I guess, from years ago about?
So when we did our 2018 regional bike and ped plan, as far as I've been here, that's been one of the most engaged group of individuals that we've reached out to. They're very organized. They're very vocal, and they share their opinions on
Biking?
biking and pedestrian access. And they're also very subject matter experts as far as their experiences with the trails and where deficiencies are and where yet better connections could be made. So that's actually a planning endeavor where when we do public outreach, we'll be pretty surprised with the amount of feedback that we do get.
Kind of on that, we recently got a grant that will put a wide 10-foot wide trail, center of through Cape County Park North.
And the gap would be right there, the Veterans Memorial that we have with the big flag down through the woods to Walnut Park where it picks up the city's trail. There. Well, that's coming.
That's about your TAP grant.
It's good. Yeah.
To maybe start that. Then,
So looking at connecting Cape to Jackson is really kind of close.
Yeah, this would build off of those.
Yeah, it's a good foundation.
The next item that they had prioritized or recommend to the board are intersection studies, and this again touches another agenda item that we'll get to. But that we have received requests for intersection studies in the past, one most recently. So I pitched the idea of planning that as a work component for this fiscal year. What I've estimated there is the completion of 2 intersection studies to be decided by the planning committee and the board. At a budget estimate of about 13,000 per study. I got that estimate from the example of the city of Jackson's intersection analysis of 61 in Deerwood. It was right around that budget number. So if the board is interested in the planning committee's recommendation, we would schedule to commission 2 different intersection studies within our planning area with that budget number that you see there. The next one, and this is one that I had originally pitched to our planning committee, but I was honest with them and telling them I really don't know everything there is to know about what an origin and destination study all accomplishes. It was an example that I've seen similar composed MPOs of our size and demographic incorporate into the work plans. But what I had originally pitched is a complete origin destination study. And in learning more about the plans, I had it reminded me of a software tool that I had received presentations on previously. And I just wanted to share a quick video of what some of the data capturing tools are available. If I can share this. When I originally envisioned it, this company collects traffic data as well as multimodal transportation data and helps develop transportation plans with it. And origin destination study are one of the plans the software helps develop. This is just a brief 1.5-minute video. Very quickly, a little over a year YouTube is on autoplay right now. That's not part of the formal presentation that I'm.
The software tracks balloons also.
Right.
Totally 3D.
About a year and a half ago, I received a presentation from the streetlight data folk. And just to refresh my memory, last week I had participated in another demo. And this is them showing me just some of the capabilities. That here they had pulled up, near the downtown Cape Girardeau. And if you see this red here, it doesn't come in great, but this red image stands up higher than all, obviously, these other ones. And this is actually measuring the traffic speeds on William Street. You can see between, that says 34 to 40 something. Here's just another angle of it. This is William Street, this is Independence Street. So the data will actually track how fast vehicular traffic is moving. It'll give you traffic counts for different segments that you select. It'll do origin destination based on location-based services in your iPhone or smartphone. And it'll see where people are starting and where they're ending up. So in researching, and this again is traffic speeds, it'll give you the percentile and then the average traffic speed in a given. And you can choose which time of day you want to measure. But just the data collection capabilities made me think of the origin destination study as benefiting pretty greatly from this type of resource. But as I got into the budget and how many larger projects we're programming, it just seemed like a little bit too much for one fiscal year, too many different projects to be able to responsibly administer. So I wanted to keep the option of some component of an origin destination study. So what I had proposed is keeping a smaller amount, this 15,000 that you see there, as opposed to budget estimates between 150 to upwards to 200,000 for a full-blown origin destination study. Keeping that 15,000 as an option to invest into software like this that might be able to help our comprehensive safety action plan and or maybe a future plan that we haven't identified yet. Their licenses they can be project specific. So if we decide we want to invest into it for our safety action plan, we can decide to do that if we keep this budget line item in. And or we could put out our RFP solicitation for assistance with development of our safety action plan and say we prefer the respondents have some type of data collection tools like comparable to what Streetlight Data has. And if they don't have that and it's a preferred consultant, we would have a line item budget to invest project specific to develop it that way. But again, it's not something we would have to do. We would just have the option of it if we include it in our work plan for the year. Our next, yeah, no,
Did you say the entire cost of the software and hardware would be like $200,000 for this kind of thing?
I kind of conflated the two as I was speaking. What I pitched to our planning committee was the development of an origin destination study, which JATSO, which is a comparable MPO of our size, Joplin area transportation organization, they are doing one this fiscal year. And they had budgeted 200,000 for the plan development. I had reached out to them just to learn more about what their expected deliverables were. And they kind of gave me a general idea of long range transportation planning, economic development. But I haven't been able to speak to them as far as details of how the project's been going so far. There's just been emails back and forth at this point.
So that cost was just for like a full study.
That,
A
yeah,
snapshot
that
at
cost
one
would have
time,
been
not a new
correct. Yeah.
software, hardware thing.
Right, it is my understanding that they were using this software in assistance of developing their plan. But the Streetlight Data folk, they have 1-year subscription, they have 5-year subscription, or you could partner with a consultant and get a project-based subscription. And that's what that 15,000 is. And that's on the higher end for an organization our size. I was being somewhat conservative with that.
So 15,000 would cover the ability to do a study.
That would cover our ability to have a project-based subscription or a one-year subscription with the software.
1 year thing. Snapshot.
Correct. Yeah. Our next item is a GIS audit. We partner with SEMO RPC for doing our GIS mapping. And I just thought, and I had checked with Drew first before I threw this out, but I think we would benefit if we kind of went through everything that we currently do with GIS and see what yet we else could do. I think our website could definitely benefit from a lot more public facing interactive maps. I'll get calls quite often about people just asking, is XYZ in your planning area? And I'll have to reference, old PDFs and I'll find the intersection. It would be easy and it kind of makes sense just to have a lot of that forward facing on our website, look up where MPO boundaries are, find your address. But there's a lot of previous planning documents that I think could benefit also from having that as an interactive map. So I just wanted to increase our line item budget to keep SEMO RPC a little bit busier with some of our GIS stuff. And I had shared with Drew that if it becomes too laborsome, we can look to contract out elsewhere. But we do have within the city of Cape also resources for GIS too. So we would exhaust those people, and then if we still had a lot more work elements left, we might be able to contract out. So that would be increasing it by about 15,000, just to see how much work we could get out of them to build up kind of our database of mapping on our website, and then incorporating a lot of the previous planning documents into GIS maps as well.
We reimburse the city of Cape for using their contract GIS people. Since they're doing stuff with the MPO, do we reimburse the city of Cape for doing work for us?
Not to my knowledge directly, through SEMPO membership fees. They're reimbursed that way, but I don't know if
Okay.
like a county department would contact Teresa, the city.
No, I just meant like the MPO, we're the MPO organization. When we use the city of Cape people,
They haven't billed us yet.
you know what I'm saying, we reimburse them.
Yeah.
Second, that's a problem. But just like the county, if Parks Department uses the highway department, then the highway department sends Parks bill and goes, we use, that's a taxing entity
And
separate
and kind of dependent
from
on,
our stuff.
how much we would throw at, I say Teresa, because she's the city of Cape's GIS specialist. If we ended up putting a lot of work hours on her, that would be something that I could then send in a MODOC for reimbursement for our planning grant funds. Yeah.
I don't think that's appropriate.
And then the final one is our tip tool assessment. 5 years ago, we had selected through a competitive process, a company called DTS to host our tip plan, our tip amendments, and then provide a kind of interactive map. That way folks could navigate through and see each fiscal year what's scheduled and what entity is scheduled the project. This year is our last year. It will expire in 2023 as far as our service and maintenance agreement. So I wanted the ability to go back out and see what other tools are out there. I've noticed a few of those websites that have somewhat of a more user-friendly website for their tip. So that would be, so either we would pay our regular maintenance fee and go year by year, or we go out and find maybe a potential new vendor. So that would give the option of the new vendor. So that's what our planning committee recommended. Again, that's based on the draft list you have before you. And this would be a workload I would be comfortable with. I think we could complete this within a year and I could administer it. But I'm open to the board's thoughts as well. Did any of them jump out and scream, Why would we do that?
Can you just talk a minute more about the comprehensive safety action plan? Is that for the whole area, trying to identify the most dangerous spots?
It is, and I do have a handout as a reminder of what all is included in the plan. It's a one pager front and back. If I find mine, I'll hold it up.
Oh.
Yes,
There it is.
that's, Mayor has it. So that kind of outlines what the deliverables and the 4 tenets of the comprehensive safety action plan is. And Mayor Kinder was correct. It is a plan for our entire planning area, so not just Cape Jackson, the urbanized area proper. It would be for our entire MPA. And it would be really analysis of existing crashes, existing injuries and fatalities, and how to best reduce those. So it's a planning endeavor that really establishes a structure in which information is collected, reported, and reviewed. But also it's an analysis of existing conditions and how to best improve safety in the area.
This plan is required if you want to apply for a Safe Street for All certification funds.
Correct. Yeah, that was another motivating factor prior to our submission as an organization, was this would leave both Cape and Jackson and all our SEMPO member entities eligible for capital construction grants for the next cycle, once it's completed.
So there's some things in the potential projects like the multiple freight plan. Do you have any estimates on what those would be? And
So far, the only ones I've put estimates to are the ones that the planning committee had recommended. But if the board is interested in looking at budget estimates for any of the other ones that weren't recommended, I'm happy to try to put those together too.
at this point, it'd be kind of be a replacement on the list with something else.
That would be my recommendation. The planning committee, and my recommendation is the top part. But if the board would prefer to substitute one out, I can get budget estimates on those. If they wanted to add to it, I'd really have to kind of look at workload and if we'd be able to do that within the fiscal year.
Does anyone have any questions or recommendations for changes, or would they approve the list as presented?
You need a motion, one motion now?
No, what I'll do next is at our March 23rd meeting, I'll have our draft UPWP ready with these top recommendations from our planning committee. I'll hopefully by the end of this week, I'll provide that draft to MoDOT for any comments. That way, when the board has it, it'll have any MoDOT comments. And then you can take a final look at it in March to see if those are still projects that you want to support. And if so, we'll then schedule a public hearing for April and adopt it in April. All right, so with that guidance, I'll start on the draft for your March 23rd meeting.
Then we'll move on to our next item, the discussion for the IDOT unspent health policy.
Okay, so I touched on it a little bit. What I brought to our planning committee earlier was I had been attending MPO meetings with IDOT on how to best use unspent planning funds that the state of Illinois had. And one of the approved by the FHWA options was to increase the amount of planning funds that MPOs receive for the next several fiscal years. For the city of Cape Girardeau, well, for SEMPO, that amount would have been 65, right around 65,000. That had been an increase in a little over 50,000 planning funds. And then the state of Illinois offered to match, so that 20% match that we do, the state of Illinois offered to provide that match. So that'd be about 65,000 increase in fiscal year 24 for from IDOT planning fund. But that 65,000 threshold triggers additional grant agreements. As well as additional invoicing that SEMPO had to do. So we had the option of taking less. I think it was a 25,000 threshold. And that would not trigger the need for the additional grant agreements and registrations with different portals. So I asked the planning committee which one they would recommend, and they said that they wanted the higher amount of planning funds. So that's the recommendation to the board from the planning committee. I will say, since the planning committee had decided on that recommendation, I have gotten started on the pre-qualification requirements, the internal controls questionnaire, the indirect cost rate election. I populated our organization contacts, and I have a draft budget template that I'm going to submit to them. So all that to say is I have been working toward that. So if the board approves the higher amount, at this point, it wouldn't be too much additional work to accept those funds.
And you have a plan to expend.
And we have a plan to expend it. That's correct. So we want to be able to expend that 65 within our fiscal year. And one idea I had was we'll put the amount of additional planning funds from Illinois toward the development of the SEMO Regional Trail Connection Study, since that is MPO planning area wide study. So it would benefit Illinois as well as we cross over the Emerson Memorial Bridge.
How far does our MPO extend east?
East into East Cape Girardeau. I don't know the exact acreage. It's not much.
I think
It's a little stretch on
just
146.
Basically, this is
This is the bill.
Yeah.
So we're not envisioning a trail to the Big Pony.
You got the bridge.
That's not the goal.
Not to the front.
Please.
Yeah.
We'll move on to the next item, discussion for Route 621 and Purple Road traffic study request.
Okay, so this was a request that we received from the county in the special road district on. Let's see if I can pull it up without having to get up. I'm just gonna pull up the intersection real quick. 621 Perryville Road. First asked if it's in our planning area, and I had to pull up my PDF. Find out that it was. So it's this intersection here. See me circle in there. I'll zoom in. Just a second. This intersection obviously has some alignment issues. And it's on both the county's radar and the special road district's radar as in terms of being improved. They're looking at some right-of-way acquisition, which this would be the Cape Municipal Golf Course. Some right-of-way acquisition around that property area. They really don't know at this point how much or what that alignment would look like. So it would benefit from an intersection study comparable to the Jackson and Deerwood 61 study, analyzing different alignment options and the best intersection treatment for this, be it signalized or roundabout or what have you. So I put it on this agenda, but we had also decided to recommend it as a work element. So the planning committee was comfortable with prioritizing this intersection. But they also wanted to budget for a total of 2 intersections this fiscal year to perform intersection studies on.
And so this, I think Mark Phillips, Case Road District appeared before the TPC. And answered all the questions there that they had from that. The county has been there 10 years and I've had 1 or 2 or 3 phone calls a year on it. Of course, I just send them off Cape Special Road District because Cape Special Road District, that's one of their intersections of their 70 miles of inventory that they have. And that's also their bridge that's there. The bridge is still structurally efficient, I guess, or sufficient highway guys from that. However, it's on their 5-year plan in terms of by the time 5 years comes, it's probably time to do something with that bridge. And so for a hierarchy, they've got so much BRO money themselves, things that they do to get it done that there's pressing needs to get done first. But the lining that intersection up there is important. Of course, it'll take some right away from the city of Cape for the from that. It's not like a special road district. If a study was done and some of the engineering was done ahead of time for them, that they may put that on their radar a little sooner. From that, and it could be that the county might try to apply for a grant to help them, a DRA grant or something. On that or whatever from that, but I did the little preliminary, just kind of checking, just thought, somebody, well, there's accidents there all the time, every day. So I did some checking, and so the last 20 years, the highway patrol, there have been 82 reported accidents at that location with 40 injuries. And I'm gonna go ahead and put together, kind of need to ask for just simple report. I got a real nice report. Highway patrol actually saw forward that to you, so you have good information. And just kind of looking through it real quick, as it looked like about 40% of them, maybe almost 50 were just single car. Or failed, going too fast or failed to negotiate that turn or whatever. And then a good portion, like this isn't scientific, it's kind of looking through it real quick. People going north-south and not stopping at the stop sign, either going north, the top or south coming down.
It's hard to decide where you're supposed to stop.
It is.
I
It
never
really is. And I started traveling that more. I mean, I own property just south of that, but I started traveling that. I lived downtown Cape when the DDI was going on. I just went up Perryville Road because everybody else on Perryville Road was coming into Cape. Just head out that way till the south and come up through Bank. But I think there's a lot of people still, like myself, still have got that. So it'll be interesting on traffic study of the county.
Yeah.
You want to have the discussion on that? And we'll move on to the next resolution number 2023-01. Resolution authorizing an application to the U.S. Department of Transportation for the rebuilding of American infrastructure with sustainability and equity grant program.
So this is the RAISE grant, and Jeremy, I apologize, I probably just put RAISE, you might have to read all that. Scott Meyer had met with me last Friday. Again, he had presented with Mr. Norman about the feasibility of the Trans-America corridor. And he was interested in pursuing a planning grant through the RAISE program and asked if SEMPO would be the applicant on behalf of the planning initiative. The program is structured to where SEMPO does qualify as a rural area. And for this cycle, rural areas don't require a local match. So it will be a zero match requirement for the application. And he's looking at a planning study that would evaluate connection between Paducah, Kentucky to Van Buren, about 150 miles of a stretch that they would then use the grant funds to develop a plan for different alignments and routing options. But this is on a very quick timeline as applications are due February 28th. So I told him I'd put it on the board agenda since this would be the only opportunity to be able to bring it.
Is it a matching grant?
There is no match requirement. We could decide if we wanted to provide a match, but Mr. Meyer had made the request under the understanding that the application would be asking for zero match, zero local.
If you received it, who's in charge?
SEMPO would be the grant administrator, so essentially myself. and some part of that, the proposed agency for SEMPO. It would be myself and Squire.
Because I'm just a little confused about where the whole I-66 where the whole project stands.
Right.
So,
I know when they had presented in front of the board, they were looking at a broader scale. And I believe that they kind of had strategically narrowed their efforts. And now they're at between Paducah and Van Buren, trying to attempt more bite-sized chunks of the planning effort.
They found any municipal or state or federal officials to give on this?
Not that I'm aware of. I know that they've had different conversations, but I don't know who's signed off. The advocate.
So it's just-
Fine.
it's all over. Just over.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I was in the last meeting with the transparent corridor, Justin told her all this was never gonna happen. I just want to make sure, I think that Dwayne's question is,
Was addressed and they pretty well said, good luck, we're not paying.
stop.
The Highway Commission, I think that was asbestos 5 months ago. So I hope that's helpful.
Seems to me it is, but
I would also throw out, I don't know if I'm supposed to ask questions here or not, but you know, have you looked at the raise application? I know some communities spend like $100,000 with a consultant to fill out all of the details. It's not always just a script to fill out.
Yeah, I've gone through the application. A lot of the construction ones are very labor intensive, but this one kind of seemed a little bit more narrative driven. We didn't have to do a cost benefit analysis or anything.
well, it's, for me, it's a confusing concept of how an individual essentially can get, you know, some kind of government action happening. When there's really no group that kind of signs on or off until, I guess this is that moment.
And this is the vehicle they've chosen for the application. So the individual asking for, you know, the government sign on is kind of right now. It would be up to this board if they wanted to lend our organization as the applicant.
And it's really it's a feasibility study.
Yeah,
Right.
it's a feasibility / planning study.
Well, I've been in a lot of meetings and conversations about this particular topic, and Paul Norman is adamant that the Trans-American corridor goes over the Bill Emerson Bridge, which, you know, some of us in the city of Cape take issue with, quite frankly. So I don't. This is just odd to me. But they're following whatever process I guess they can find, trying to get something moving.
Alex has SEMPO sponsored a study outside the boundaries of the field.
Not to my knowledge.
This is Betsy Tracy with Federal Highway Administration, Illinois Division. And you mentioned SEMPO. I don't believe that, I don't know any MPO, very honestly, that has looked outside their planning area necessarily to support a study. I, you know, as a reviewer of some of these grants in the past, obviously one thing that the federal government looks for is commitment by the locals for, presumably that a project might go forward. So I think you need to be, cognizant of that. If they do get funding, or you get funding, you're essentially, kind of a party to this whole thing. And then, what happened, what's the next phase? Because presumably, when people do a feasibility or, study of some kind, they have an idea that they want to, have a project that would come out of that. So I just say words of caution because, there's generally support letters, there's generally financial backing. Oftentimes, they'll want to know whether it's in the plans, how this affects affected groups, how this affects environment. So there it's a bigger deal than maybe just voting to support somebody doing a study. So just something to think about. And these discretionary pots of money are, while we have a lot of them, they are, still highly sought after and very competitive. So just some thoughts. I don't know all the geography. I don't know if this is related to the first presentation today or something different.
A competing concept.
A competing concept. Okay. Well, I'm just saying there you go. I mean, I'm just saying is it could be very convoluted, perhaps. There are other opportunities for funding. There are other years when the funding is available. It's not a one and done. So, I mean, I would just think, closely of, what as a body do you want to support? Because this would be kind of putting you on record as, obviously supporting federal funds for the purpose of this study. So, or any other. So I just want to throw it out there. I'm sorry, I'm not there in person. It would be much easier to communicate. Thanks.
Thank you, Beth.
So the motion to die.
I would agree with that. I think we're together in this, as a.
But to reiterate, MoDOT is absolutely not.
Well, that's not funding it. I heard the commission say it themselves. Good luck. We're not funding it.
That tells me all I need to know.
They're done.
Okay.
Yep, so with that, we'll pass on that for now, and that goes into member reports. Real quick, let's talk to CK. Any reports?
I will answer the much asked question. Lexington Avenue will be worked on in 2024. That seems to be the very pressing question. That's part of our DPF 6, and that is the plan. Yes.
All right, let's go across special road districts. Here, Cambridge and Sheila. City Jackson.
We're just gearing up our annual concrete street and asphalt overlay maintenance program. That's all I'm looking for.
Okay, perfect.
Got our list of roads to pave, overlay, that type of thing, but we don't have our bids out yet for asphalt, so we'll have to know, but I think we're kind of already gearing up to maybe spine it, laying it down ourselves again during the summer. That'll probably be the way to do it. That rock came in, so we use a lot of limestone in the county. 200 something miles of roads that we gravel on, and then base when we get ready to pave. Basically, the quarries wouldn't give us a price. And the price that they did give us is just good for 30 days. So, how you do that as a government agency, right, Mark, for bid. So we just flat said, hey, we're going to accept the price, and then we'll just accept the price, whatever it is, when the guys go get it and send us a bill. That's all we can do. So, fully staffed.
Transit.
As you all know, we've had a shortage of drivers. But we have been hiring lately and doing better at it. We're probably still short 5 or 6 out of 60. And also vehicles is been a big problem. Can't buy them, can't find them anywhere. But we just got 2 new wheelchair vans last week, which will help, but we're short about 5 more we'd like to buy. Other than that, everything else.
Still working on build. We got about $1.4 million from the state this year that's gonna match those dollars, our federal dollars, so. We're obviously stretching the state dollar a little further. We're still in the process of the design with our engineer on the material handling portion of our overall project. They're dragging their feet and they're not wanting to do some things that we've asked. So hopefully, we have that under contract this summer so they can get started. Technically, our application ends this July, which obviously that means I get to go through a whole new process of extending said agreement. So that'll be fun. But we're working on that. That's basically our main focus right now, is still the track.
Seymour RPC, I'm sure you have anything for us.
Just working on the new tip, waiting on transit projects from CTA and university. When I get those for the next 4 years, then put those in the tip. And run some of the numbers and have the draft. Hopefully there's a ready to go. So hopefully I can get those projects in the next couple of weeks. Get that put in.
Do we need to strong arm Tom today to get some of those projects? Right?
I will say the Missouri Association of RPCs, Council of Governments, our counterpart out of the Springfield is Southwest COG, or SEMPO. They are working on a raise grant for a full electric charging study. So they're organizing that statewide. But if that gets approved, it'll be a statewide effort. All the RPCs, all the rural RPCs in the state will kind of support that. That is something that could be coming up if it's funded. Boot Hill RPC, Scott, do you have anything to share?
Scott, you're still on mute if you heard it. Now you're off mute, but we can't hear you. You there?
Sorry, Scott, I can't hear you. We're gonna move on. We're going to Seymour Ready. I'll let, since Andy did the first one, right?
Seymour Ready is working with Seymour RPC on a TA grant application for us to analyze and plan better for Nash Road reinvestment. So the private developer that's working on a 350 acre industrial park down there in partnership with Scott City for a grant through the state department program. And then we're hoping to follow that up with a study for the broader Nash Road region that will be comprehensive and then complement and support Seymour's effort as well as Cape Girardeau Regional Airport.
I will go to Moda.
So I talk a lot about inflation. It's the time of year that we do our funding forecast because we want to program every dollar we have for the next 5 years. When I look back over the last 18 months, it's unlike anything I've seen in my career. You know, we have about $1 billion a year program right now, and you're looking at about 30% inflation over the last 18 months. So that's around $300 million over what we estimate. It's interesting to see revenue reports because fuel tax is up. There was a clause that allowed for reimbursement of the recently passed that we assume 20%, only 1% or less than 1% of change reimbursement. You know, gas use is up, but it's trumped by inflation. So taking a look at the immediate needs, you know, we've moved some work out of this year already.
about 5 asphalt projects worth about $10.8 million in southeast Missouri, and 4 turn lane intersections worth about $6.5 million. You know, those needed some additional design time anyways. To give an idea, like one of the asphalt jobs, Route 177, all the way up to 61 highways, one that we pushed to the fall. So it wasn't in that bad a shape. You know, you kind of guess when you get to program them how they're going to deteriorate, you think you can make it fine with that, but we're going to look at a lot more flexibility when we're letting jobs. You know, there's just no capacity left. Quarries are telling us they can't possibly make the rock we need, and we're looking at opening it up to where it's like, well, if we want to bid, it's just do it the next 2 years. You know, so you might see construction work that affects more school or even bridge work that affects business because we can't get bids if we don't do that. Looking at the program for 2024, we're in the process. We've updated estimates. We're moving $64 million or $68 million out, not because we don't have money, but because that's how much the cost of construction has risen. Now, we've been pretty continuously awarding jobs to make sure our contractors can grow, but they're facing a lot of things I've heard here. Can't get parts for pavers, they can't keep their asphalt plant running. They had people retired, they can't have it. So it's just the reality that we live in. Looking at a couple of others that I had on the list, I thought this area might be interested in. KM25 is one I had said I hope to see construction this summer. We had a great public meeting. A lot of people turned out. There were some ideas from that we needed to buy a little more right away. So that's actually moving from a spring letting to a fall letting. That means you really won't see construction until next year. Will be this summer. It is still a priority. Our priorities are shifting more and more to asset management and safety. You know, anything that has a look of capacity improvements really being pushed back on the list just because the challenges with money. So, that's kind of the high level look. Some of my staff may have more details for you. I don't think that's a surprise, is it? I hope not.
Joe.
Let's see if Mike got something first. I do have something. Let's see if Mike's got something first.
Not much. No, Mark did a really good job summarizing all that. We're in the process right now. We're looking at we're delaying, you know, 60 plus $70 million worth of work just about out of each year in the STIP, and we're essentially not adding new ones. What we are adding are relatively very small job order style type contracts for guardrail, guard cable repairs. So basically, we're not adding any new projects to the STIP. This is just all from the existing jobs that are already in there, and they've grown so much they've got us over our program capacity, what we desire to be at for our 5 years. So we're doing that. Another thing we're kind of doing right now is we're still looking at. There's the threat of the attack still on Senate Bill 262. So we're trying to identify projects in our STIP program that could be at risk of being delayed further if the attack on 262 was to be successful. So they're making another run at that. So we're just trying to be prepared and see and illustrate how that would affect the STIP if that did go through. So that's all I have.
So to Mike's point, with the pushing the funds back or pushing projects back, as Mark indicated, without adding a lot of projects, or typically in the spring, we end up submitting a list of new projects to Drew to go ahead and put into the new TIP. So I think what we're going to see a lot of this year will just be projects kind of moving back, but we're starting a new TIP because we haven't had, so some of those projects that we've had in our STIP were not included in the TIP because they were status figure 24 and forward, and our current TIP ended was a 20 through 23. So I guess we will have new projects. They just won't be new for us. It'll just be and there'll be some movement amongst what we already had in our STIP. Getting kind of pushed back into the outer years. That's it.
All right. Chris, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, a little bit. Mike, or Mark already touched on the K and 25 project, but I did want to mention that Route 61, Hubble Creek Bridge, and the work that we're doing on that section of road, we met with the city last week to, basically the meeting was geared towards the utility relocations on that project, but a lot more was discussed, and we're moving right along on that one. We're going to be able to let that this May, hoping to have a July notice to proceed. So I need to reach out to a lot of the schools and local EMS and things like that, because that'll be kind of hectic starting back up school right as we're starting to do construction on that, because it will be staged construction, meaning that we're going to close a portion of the Route 61 down in stages, and there will be some detours on the city streets through there. So look forward to letting that one this May. It's going to be really busy in the Jackson area in the next year or so. We're also doing a bridge over Birds Creek on Route D. That one will let also on January 19th of next year, but that'll happen to fall in the same construction season as the Route 61 project, and it'll also be a closure. So we'll have to coordinate that work with the contract on Route 61. And then also we have the Deerwood Drive project that the city's currently working on a roundabout at Deerwood Drive. So we got that along with K and 25, and then the overlay that was delayed from last year because the bids came in high. So we're going to have to, I don't know when Mike's planning on letting that one again, but that still needs to be done as well. Just wanted to remind everybody that we do still have traditional cost share projects. Applications are due in April 18th, or I'm sorry, April 14th. So if you're interested in any traditional cost share projects that have to be on the state system, let me know right away, because we need to work through a lot of the vetting process so that you can submit an application early on. Last month we awarded several projects. The only one that I noticed was in the MPO area was the contract at the diversion channel on Route 25 in Cape County to basically fix a lot of the scour at that bridge. That was awarded to Strack Excavating for $114,000. And that's all I got.
Thank you. I got nothing else to report. Okay, how about Federal Highway, Betsy?
Well, congratulations on getting the Safe Streets and Roads for All planning grant funding. That's fantastic. But now the hard work is going to begin, especially for the Missouri division will be your point of contact, I believe, on that, if you haven't already been talking with them. This particular discretionary program, I believe this is about the first time that FHWA has administered, will be administering grants and implementation grants. So, generally we see projects that are state administered. So this is a kind of a very new paradigm for us, and we'll see how this all goes, but best of luck with this. And, obviously when you have that in place, it'll put you in a better position for obtaining implementation funds, as well as, safety funding, probably maybe in other categories. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. That's anyone, Alex, you got anything to say?
Next week, I'll be in Jefferson City on Thursday for the MoDOT statewide planning partner meeting. And then over the next several weeks, FHWA shared that they'll be hosting webinars on how to execute the grant agreements for the Roseboro. So as FHWA learns about how this is going to work, we'll be learning with them. That's all I got.
All right. Does anyone else have any comments or questions they'd like to bring up? All right, hearing none. Set the motion to adjourn. Second. For adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.
I know what it's